This is what should be done by... You have... Yeah.
I definitely have. I'm sorry I don't
know. No, take... That's fine.
All mixed there. All right. Yes. There we go. I've got the correct one. There we go. That's it.
Okay. This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, unburdened with duties, and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm, and wise and skillful, not proud and demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove, wishing in gladness and in safety. May all beings be happy, whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born. May all beings be happy. Let none deceive another, or despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another, even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child. So with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings, radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the depths, outwards and unbounded, freed from hatred and ill will, whether standing or walking, seated or lying down, free from drowsiness. One should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding. By not holding to fixed views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desires, is not born again into this world. Okay, sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Okay, so I just fire away, Chris, or yeah?
Fire away.
Okay. Okay, excellent. So we'll start off by just talking a little bit about meditation as usual. And it is always the case, I think, that with meditation, it's actually such a simple thing. Yeah? It's such a really kind of, all you have to do is to watch the breath. I mean, what could be simpler than that? In theory, right? In theory, it's so simple. The breath is there. You have a bit of presence of mind. You kind of bring the presence of mind together with the breath, and bang, you have meditation right away. Yeah. So it's kind of weird why people find it so hard. And very often people look in entirely the wrong place to find the solution to why it doesn't work. Yeah. And they say, oh, maybe I'm using the wrong meditation object. Yeah, maybe I'm sitting in the wrong way. Maybe I'm kind of relating to the breath in the wrong way, and all of these kind of things. And very often they are looking in the wrong place for the solution to why meditation doesn't work. It's very important to understand the causes for meditation. I'll talk a bit more about that later on, because then you can actually look where it really matters to find a solution to the problem. Maybe there isn't even a problem. Maybe it's just kind of you make it up and then it becomes a problem because you think there is a problem. So the answer to this is very simple. Usually the mind is just not ready. That's why you can't meditate. So the trick is always then to change the state of your mind or try to incline the mind in the right direction. And as you do that, then suddenly meditation becomes possible. And it can change so fast, right? You can be sitting there, the mind can be completely out of control. You can be kind of thinking all the place. You can have you can fall asleep, or you think you're going crazy, or whatever it is. There can be so many things happening, and suddenly you get the right perception. Suddenly you think in the right way, and everything just stops like that. It's kind of very strange, because all it means is that you're looking at the world in a new way, and that new way of looking at the world changes everything. Of course, a very big part of this is just having the sila, the morality foundation for meditation. This is absolutely necessary. If you have good sila, good morality, you tend to feel good about yourself. You tend to feel worthy. You tend to feel like, yes, you have this good inner feeling, a warm inner glow, if you like, and these kind of things, because you know that you're living well. But there's another aspect to this, and this is what we were talking about a little bit last time when we looked at this sutta, the Attadanda Sutta. And this is the idea of relating to the world in the right way. What is it that is interesting to us in the world? What are the things that kind of our mind inclines to quite naturally? And right now is a very good opportunity. With the way the world is now, is a very good opportunity to incline the mind in a different direction. Because, it's very. I haven't spoken to you, I think, I obviously haven't spoken to you since the Ukraine war started out. And people are really worried about the Ukraine war, and for good reasons probably. It doesn't look very nice. But there is a spiritual aspect to all of these things. And this is the thing I like to always remind people, is that when you see the problems in the world, if you think about it in the right way, it will incline you towards the spiritual path. Because you understand there is no refuge in that world. We're always seeking refuge in the world outside, as if that world is going to give us some kind of happiness, some kind of satisfaction, something, the relationships, the living in the right place, then everything will fall into place. No, it won't. And this is precisely the problem, and the war in Ukraine is a reminder of that. We thought in Europe that after the Second World War we would be finished with war once and for all, because the Second World War was obviously very traumatic. Even here in Australia you were affected by the Second World War, because for a number of reasons, but also because there was bombings happening right here in Australia, I understand. My Australian history is a little bit shaky, but I know a little bit about Australian history. And so it is always there in the background, and then we forget. There is that old saying that those who don't remember the history, they're doomed to repeat it. There's that old saying which some smart aleck once said, and it sounds very nice, but the point is that we always forget. We always, when it recedes in memory, we forget, and then it comes back again, and the world just carries on. It does the same mistakes again and again and again. So nothing has really gone wrong in Ukraine. Nothing is actually, this is just what we can expect in the world. So remember that, and when you remember that, it makes the world less interesting. It makes the spiritual life far more important, because that is where you find a real refuge. And if you can build up those inner qualities inside of you that make life worthwhile merely from the internal qualities point of view, then you have found a real refuge in the world. And I always found it very profound and very beautiful what Ajahn Chah used to say. He said that your real home is within. When you enter a state of samadhi, when you become truly peaceful, when you achieve the blisses and the wonderful things inside, and even if you don't achieve all of those, but you're kind of heading in that direction, that is your real home. That is where you feel really safe from the world outside, because the world outside cannot reach you in those states. And you have a state of mind that is far superior from anything you can ever expect in the world outside. And that is where we're heading to. We just have to know how to do it in the right way. We're heading to that real refuge within. And then the wars in the world won't matter anymore, because we will lose interest in that world as we're moving on this path. So take these tragedies in the world, because they are tragic. Lots of people are dying. There's enormous amount of suffering in these things. But take those tragedies and turn them into something positive. Like Ajahn Brahmali always says, good, bad, who knows? Such a beautiful saying. Yeah, we don't really know what is bad for us as individuals. For society, we can maybe say it's bad, but for us as individuals, we never know what is good or bad. It depends how we use it. If we are wise about it, then something good will come out of it. So make these difficult situations good. And when you make them good, wow, that's such a beautiful thing. Yeah, the rest of the world is suffering. And somehow you can extract yourself out of that. And then, of course, you can help others extract themselves too. Anyway, let's do some meditation together here. Okay, so just as always, take a lot of time at the beginning, just to relax and just to sit down and just to allow things to be. And as you do that, and as you start to enjoy the peace and the stillness and all of those things, and gradually you find the world kind of slipping away, the world disappearing, the world ending all by itself, because you're going into a state that is more satisfactory. And if you find yourself thinking about things, especially about the future, then remember that there's nothing really there of interest in the future. The future is just more of the same kind of things again and again, going round and round with no solution in sight. If you want to find a solution, the solution happens now, in the peace within. This is where you are creating the real future of your life. So forget about all that nonsense outside and come back to where the real action, or rather non-action is, which is in the present, right here. And as we are coming closer to the end, let's just spend a few minutes at the end just wishing all the people in Ukraine and also the people in Russia as well, because everyone over there is suffering from these happenings. So all the people at war in Ukraine and Russia, may you all be well and happy. May you soon emerge from this terrible situation. Okay, so coming close to the end now. Before we come to the end, just take a few moments just to reflect on your state of mind right now and see if it has you feeling more peaceful, more at ease, more relaxed, more joyful than when you started out. And if you do, then ask yourself why that is the case. Okay, everyone. So there you are. So do you have any questions or comments or anything you'd like to say at this point? Anyone? Everyone? No question, no comments? Okay, that's really nice. Yeah, must have had a very nice and peaceful meditation. All questions kind of dissolved out of everywhere. That's wonderful. Okay, so please, yeah, of course, absolutely, yeah.
As I went into meditation, it was just wonderful. And then all these questions and kept pulling me apart and saying, that was so stupid, you know. And then I would eventually come back again. But why do all these other thoughts insist on trying to gain entry into that peace?
Okay, so yeah, that's a very, very important question, because if we can answer that, then we can probably become quite peaceful. So why do all of these thoughts intrude? And the reality is that it's because we're interested in those thoughts. That's why they come in. If we didn't have any interest in those thoughts, those ideas, they wouldn't bother us. Yeah, we actually want to go there. And if you had a great clarity about your mind, you would actually be able to see that your intention is to think those thoughts. You want to think them. And sometimes that can be really embarrassing. I don't know about you, but I feel really embarrassed sometimes. I see the things going through our mind. I think, oh no, how can I think that? That's terrible. Do I really want to think this? This is just ridiculous. I want to think this, but actually we do. Yeah, deep down, there's all this stuff going on, and so we want to think things that we don't really want to know about. We want to have nothing to do with it. So the trick is really just to take the interest away from those things. Yeah, and this is one of the reasons why at the beginning I said about the world not really being interesting, because if you have no interest in the world, well then your thoughts are not going to go to the future and to all of those worldly issues, because basically they are irrelevant. Like what is going to make your life a good one is actually what you're doing now, whether you are sitting here enjoying yourself and having a good time, watching your breath and making peace. That is what is going to have long-term consequences for you that are good and productive. So it's all about shifting one's perspective and shifting away from, the kind of the habits of the mind. The problem is that the habits of the mind are so strong. Yeah, we have done this so many years, so many lifetimes perhaps, and because of that, the habits are very ingrained. And the more ingrained the habits are, the longer it's going to take to, let those things go and to kind of be peaceful with yourself. So meditation is all about being very patient. Be very, very patient with yourself, which is hard. And then you have to be very kind as well. You have to build up the kindness within, because the more kindness you have within, the more compassion you have for the world, the more self-worth you have, the more good you feel about yourself, the more pleasant the present moment becomes. And all of these things are things that enable the meditation practice. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good luck. Okay. So that's it. Yeah. No one else. Yeah.
Just one moment, Ajahn.
Yeah, please.
Sybil has a comment for you, and she says beautiful.
Okay.
And Michelle says, thank you, Ajahn Brahmali. I really enjoy to hear your perspective of the inner and outer worlds, and your guidance on meditation is slowly drip feeding into my psyche.
Okay, great. Okay, wonderful. So yeah.
Ajahn, would you like to continue with your talk?
Absolutely.
Or start a new topic, or?
No, I'll continue. I mean, I'm going to be saying a few different things, but anyway, I'll just, because someone asked last time, I might as well continue what we're doing before, and I'll recap a little bit in light of the new events from Europe and all of this. So I'll bring it up and I'll share my screen so you can see these verses like you saw them last time. So let's see. So there we are. Can you all see that well? Chris? Yeah.
Yes, we can see this.
Excellent.
It's looking good on my screen.
Marvelous. Okay. So let me just, there we are. So this was the sutta we had looking at last time. You may remember this. It's called Taking Up Arms. And we did the first few verses. The first few verses are all about how to look at the world, how to think about the world. And it's kind of amazing because, I was saying last time, this is the Buddha's outlook on the world. And so this is what we can expect in the world. And lo and behold, since last time, from last time till now, we had this massive flare-up in Europe, in the heart of Europe, Ukraine-Russia thing, flared up just like the sutta is predicting. It's kind of almost astonishing how correct this is. It's really, really amazing. And so I think it's very fitting maybe to continue a bit on this sutta and then see how the Buddha or the Buddha to be, how he dealt with this situation. So let's, I'll read out the first verses again, just to remind you of what it was about, and then we can look at what happens afterwards. So taking up arms, Atta Danda Sutta, and this is what the Buddha is saying. This is before he became the Buddha. This is why he was still searching for awakening, and he was looking at the world, and he was deciding how to live his life and what are the consequences of seeing the world in as the world actually is, so to speak. So this is what he says: peril stems from those who take up arms or violence. Danda is like weapons or conflict. Just look at people in conflict. I shall extol how I came to be stirred with a sense of urgency here. So here the Buddha is going to tell us how it is that he got the sense of becoming a monk. The sense of urgency is really the idea of renouncing your ordinary life and becoming a monastic at that time, which meant really going off into the forest and doing meditation practice and finding suitable teachers and all of these kind of things. So what is it that made the Buddha renounce the ordinary life? This is very fascinating here, because the Buddha always teaches from his experience and then tells us essentially that if this is what he did, we should be doing the same thing. So this is not just the Buddha, this is actually the way, or one important aspect of the way towards spiritual progress. This is really what is going on here. So then he says, I saw this population flounder like a fish in a little puddle. Seeing them fight each other, fear came upon me. The population floundering like fish in the puddle, that's like we're seeing now in Ukraine and Russia. We're seeing people floundering, don't know what they're doing. They're fighting each other. And while we're seeing the fighting happening in Ukraine and Russia, well, a lot of people become fearful because of that, especially if you live nearby and if you live in these countries. It is frightening to see what we do with each other. And it's not as if we have any choice, really. These things just happen. This is part of human society. It is part and parcel of what it means to live in the sensory realm. So not something that we really can get away from. If you want to get away from these things, you have to do something very different, and we will see in a second what that different thing actually is. So fear came upon the Buddha to be. The world around was hollow. All directions were in turmoil. Wanting a home for myself, I saw nowhere unsettled. The world is hollow. It means that there is no substance to the world. There's always changing, there's always in turmoil, there's always violence, there's always change. There's nothing to hold on to anywhere. Everything is just so uncertain in that world. And when you want to find somewhere safe for yourself, a home where you can really relax, actually, such a place does not exist. But even in their settlement, they fight. Seeing that, I grew averse. Then I saw a dart there, so hard to see, stuck in the heart. So even when people settle down, they keep on fighting each other, even from their homes or whatever it might be. And violence kind of often starts off perhaps within family or between acquaintances or between people who are close to each other. And then it grows out into the larger community, and then you have the nations fighting. It's just we fight on all scales, basically. And this is the problem. And seeing this, the Buddha had a sense of aversion. I can't remember what the Pali word here is, but it's something to do with being repelled almost by this whole thing. So he has a sense of fear. He has a sense of unease and being repelled by the world. And this is really the right view of the Buddha, seeing the fear in that sensory realm, the danger in that sensory realm, turning in a different direction, turning towards the spiritual path. But before he does that, he saw something else, and what he saw was the cause, the root of this problem. And this is the dart that is stuck there in the heart. And of course that dart is the dart of desire, the dart of craving, which has these very negative consequences for us. When struck by that dart, you run about in all directions. But when that same dart has been plucked out, you neither run about nor sink down. The dart is the dart of craving, which makes us move in the world, makes us do all of these things as if we are going somewhere really useful. But very often not going anywhere at all. We're just kind of standing still, running around. And sometimes we go in reverse. We're actually creating worse lives for us through our silly actions and our bad ideas about how to make a life for ourselves. But then you realize this. You realize the answer is, well, if that is the case, maybe I should try to remove this dart. And the moment you remove the dart, you stop running about. You stop being a slave to craving. Craving driving you on always making your life really restless and agitated and all of these kind of things, trying to move somewhere, when in fact all the places we try to move are really pointless, because we are within the same puddle, in the same dam, in the same world, still floundering, thrashing about, trying to find our way out. But we're not actually getting anywhere because we are stuck in that same place. To get out of that place, we need to look in a very different direction, and this is really the point. That is where the dart gets plucked out. You don't run around anymore, nor do you sink down. You don't get depressed or sad because you don't get those worldly desires fulfilled, or those attachments to, whatever that might be that you are looking for. Whatever attachments there are in the world. So here, now we are moving on to a different aspect of these verses. So, and I think this is where we came to last time. I can't remember exactly, but I think this is roughly where we came to last time. And the first part of these verses are, you can see, about right view, how we think about the world. And it's a very interesting idea of right view, because it's quite different from how we normally think about right view in Buddhism. We talk about right view in terms of rebirth and karma and devas perhaps, and all these different realms and all these kind of things. But right view is so much more than that. Right view is our outlook about the world, whether the world, what is really worthwhile in this life? Is this world really, can we fix it? And the answer, of course, is that we can always help out. We can always do something good. We can help other people. But we also need to understand that the world is inherently unfixable. And this is really the answer, or the insight that the Buddha to be has at this particular point. And because it is inherently unfixable, while we try to do our best to help out, to guide people in the right way, we also pursue a path which leads us out of that world. And that is what the Noble Eightfold Path is all about. And it's like a gradual movement. Yes, as we start practicing to get out of this world, it's as if we are gradually elevating our minds, to higher and higher levels. It's almost as if we are passing through the various heavenly realms, one by one, as we are detaching, as we are purifying ourselves, as we are building up the beautiful qualities within. There's something happens in our mind. It becomes light, it becomes bright. We become more deva-like. We become more like the gods inside. Yeah, if you ever wanted to know what it's like to be a god, close your eyes and feel all the good qualities within, and then you have some idea what it means to be godlike within. So we're going through these stages, yeah, and as we are going through them, we are like letting go of the coarse sensory world of the human realm, which is so problematic. This is where there is more violence. This is where there is more conflict, because the sensory realm is so coarse and because we're all attaching and desiring the same things. That realm is always going to be problematic. So it's kind of amazing that, you know, the way to solve the world's problem is to close your eyes and go within. And that is where you go beyond, you kind of transcend the entire sensory realm, and then you leave it behind. And of course that then leads to ultimately a rebirth, where also you leave that entire realm behind. This is kind of the path of this. And the way that path works is what the Buddha is talking about now. From the right view comes the right intention or the right aim, samma sankappa. And once you have that samma sankappa, then the path starts to happen. Yeah, it just happens whether you want to or not. So if you don't want this path, you're still going to get it, yeah, because now you see things in the right way and you want to get out of it. So of course you want that. Oh, everyone wants that. Everyone wants to be happy. Yeah, that's just the kind of the nature of the human mind. So you start to practice. Yeah, and one of the things that you see that the Buddha has precisely pointed out now, that all these attachments in the world, you don't pursue them anymore because you understand they're pointless. You have to do something else. So then by piercing through that, by seeing that, you train yourself for Nibbana, and then the path gradually comes together. So let's see a bit more about what that path actually is. And this is now a poetic representation of this path. Yeah? This is why it is a little bit different. It's not really a very structured way. It is poetic, so it is supposed to be inspiring, and it gives you a few angles that maybe you're not so used to, but that is also what makes it interesting in to my mind. Yeah? So the Buddha says, be truthful, not rude, free of deceit and rid of slander. Without anger, a sage would cross over the evils of greed and avarice. Yeah, so these are obviously things you recognize straight away. Yeah, these are all things that are kind of negative mind states, and some of them also being external expressions of those mind states. All of them are problematic. And so the question is, how do we overcome them? And of course, if you want to overcome all of these things, the first thing is to recognize them. So one of the difficult things about the Buddhist path is that you have to be brutally honest with yourself. You have to see yourself as you really are. And you have to kind of accept, okay, I'm not perfect, and that's okay. The first thing is to have enough compassion for yourself, to enable yourself to be honest about who you are. If you don't have compassion for yourself and kindness for yourself, you will hide your faults because you don't have the strength within to be able to deal with your own faults. And that is a problem. But if you build up that sense of self-compassion, of kindness, of understanding that you are, in a sense, a victim of your own habits and of external circumstances, then that enables you to be truthful with yourself and see your problems. And once you understand what the problems are, well, it's quite obvious. Yeah, we know what these problems are. The Buddha is here listing them for effect to remind us. But I think we all know when we see these things inside of us that these are negative things to be overcome. Yeah, so it's kind of obvious. I will talk more in a second about how to overcome them as a group without really talking too much detail about each one of these. So let's just move on now. Okay. Prevail over sleepiness, sloth and drowsiness. Don't abide in negligence. A person intent on Nibbana would not stand for arrogance. Yeah, so more defilements of the mind, sleepiness, sloth and drowsiness. And we know what that is like. How do we overcome that? Well, then one of the most important ways of overcoming that is really to have more kindness in your heart, have more metta, have more love, have more compassion for everyone in the world. Because sleepiness and drowsiness is very often a state that comes from wanting to escape, seeing too much suffering, not having enough happiness within. If you have a bright and beautiful mind within, full of happiness, you won't be slothful. So don't try to deal with the sleepiness directly, deal with it indirectly by working on the kindness. That I think is far more effective than trying to overcome it through some other means, because actually it is usually the first two of the 5 hindrances that are the most important ones, and that is the desire for the things of the world and of course the ill will. And metta, kindness, overcomes all of that. Don't abide in negligence, apamada, or pamada. And the idea here is that you have to always to be alert, you always have to be circumspect and careful in how you live. We cannot really put down our guard because it's so easy for the defilements of the mind, the bad habits from the past, to overtake the mind and then lead you astray, lead you by the nose, as they say, and then you are in serious trouble as a consequence. So negligence is bad. Don't be negligent. Be alert instead to the problems of life. A person intent on nibbana would not stand for arrogance or would not remain in arrogance is another way of translating this. Arrogance, we had to be very careful with these defilements. It's very easy to be a bit arrogant. If you are a good Buddhist, maybe you think you are better than other people. It's easy to think that, right? Well, I'm practicing well, I'm doing well. These other dodgy people, they don't do anything. All they do is go to war and they send missiles and they kill other people. They are not real Buddhists. We are superior to them. And it's very easy, and I know people very often have this feeling that, a sense of superiority perhaps, because they are spiritual people, practice on the path, and they look down maybe on people who are not practicing. But it's entirely the wrong way to go about this. And the reason is that we never know who is really deeply spiritual deep down. We never know how quickly things change. I may be spiritual today, tomorrow I may be a really dodgy scallywag. What you see, it may look nice, okay, good, no hair and nice brown robes, but what is lurking beneath all of these robes? You have no idea what's going on. Hopefully it's not so bad, but you can't tell. Things change so fast. We can never allow ourselves to be arrogant. We can never allow ourselves to look down upon anyone. We are just changing blobs of 5 khandhas, changing blobs of personality characteristics, always moving from one state to another one. And we can never really compare ourselves with anybody in the whole world. So then you stop being arrogant because you realize that there is no comparison to be made or to be had. Don't be led into lying or get caught up in fondness for form. Completely understand conceit and desist from hasty conduct. Fondness for form just means fondness for the beautiful shapes in the world. We know what that means. Understanding conceit, understanding the idea of I am. Here, this is getting very profound now. It's kind of a mixture of the profound and the not profound. It's kind of interesting here. And desist from hasty conduct. This is kind of a very interesting one. Very often we can be too spontaneous in the way we act. Sometimes people like to be spontaneous because spontaneity kind of brings you alive. And sometimes spontaneity is good if it's coming from a really good place. But be careful with spontaneity and hasty conduct when you have defilements within, because that is when you make mistakes. So if you feel a bit like dodgy, you feel that your mind is not in a perfectly good place, hold back. Be careful, watch your conduct, because it's so easy to go wrong when your mind is defiled. Don't be hasty here. Allow things to be, hold back a little bit, and then we can reflect at least a little bit on what we should be doing here, and then far better conduct comes out of that as a consequence. So hasty conduct is always bad. A bit of mindfulness and oversight of what we're doing is always so important. Don't relish the old or welcome the new. Don't grieve for what is running out or get attached to things that pull you in. Yeah, this is a reminder of those very famous verses in the sutta called the Baddekaratta Sutta, the one auspicious night sutta found in the middle-length saying, the Majjhima Nikaya 131. And there's a beautiful sutta about how to be in the present and how to be able to meditate properly. Yeah? It's about not how does it go again? Not hanging out and not kind of thinking about the past, nor having expectations for the future, but living with clear seeing here in the present. Yeah? And this is very similar to that. We don't hold on to the past. We let go of the past. You forgive what has happened before. We are imperfect. Everyone is imperfect. It's okay. Let it go. We don't welcome the new. We don't look forward to the future. Nor do we welcome what is coming our way. Because we know that the future is dangerous. The future, there's nothing there of real interest. The future is too uncertain. The future is more of the same. More problems coming up after the problems that we have now, and there's no end to that. So we allow the future to be here. And when the future arrives, we don't hold on to it. We don't welcome the new. We allow the mindfulness to flow along. Yeah? So there's no aversion and no desire in the mind. The mind becomes even. The mind becomes beautiful as a consequence. And we're able to react to the world in a wholesome way. We don't grieve for what is running out or attach to the things that pull you in. Greed, I say, is the great flood. The longing is the current. The basis, the compulsion, the swamp of sensuality, so hard to get past. So this is basically talking about the sensory world. Yeah, this is very profound. I mean, these suttas are very deep and very profound, and it takes someone very committed to the spiritual teachings really to fully appreciate these kind of things. So the whole world of the five senses, that is the flood, the greed, all the attachments we have to that world, and that is essentially the only world we have, unless we develop the inner world, which goes beyond that. Longing is the current in that great flood of the five senses. The craving is the current that drives you on. Yeah, this compulsion inside that makes you act in that world as if there is a real goal, as if there is really some purpose in that world. But there is no purpose. It's just round and round and round. It's kind of it's almost scary when you think about it, unless you are used to these ideas. Some of these ideas can be quite sort of off-putting for many people if they hear about these things. But if we are realistic and we look at the world in the present day, we realize that maybe this is true. Yeah, there's something about this which kind of fits with how the world looks if you look over long spans of time. Of course, if you take into account rebirth, it changes the equation completely. It becomes far more powerful. But even looking at our present life, looking at the present world, looking at the course of history of the past few hundred or few thousand years, we can see how these things are actually just recurring things again and again, going round and round. So we extract ourselves from that swamp of sensuality, which is so hard to get past. It is so hard to get past because it is in many ways so attractive. We have our things in life, things that we hold on to, our relationships, the things that we own in the world, and these things are important to us. And it's actually hard to let go of them. And I know that even as a monk, it can be very hard to let go of these things. And so it is actually quite difficult. So that is really the path. Yeah, you can see here the path is presented in a fairly kind of idiosyncratic way. It is not really very structured. If you look at it carefully, of course, you will find many of the factors of the path. You find right speech in there, you find right action in there, you find the right effort. They're all in there somehow. But it's a kind of more of a poetic way of expressing the path. So what do we need to do to overcome these things, to practice in this way? It's a very high bar to clear. There's a lot of things in here that are really difficult to deal with, like conceit, for example, is a very deep-seated thing, or the sensual world, very hard to overcome. Some of the other things are more easy, but how can we think about this in a kind of overall way to make it easy for ourselves? And One of the things to start out with that I mentioned before is this idea that we normally know when we are on the wrong track. Yeah? We can feel it, we can feel that there are things inside of us that aren't quite right. Yeah? And we understand that if we are sensitive to our own inner lives and we are honest about ourselves and what we are doing and where we are at. And sometimes we need a little bit of help from the Buddha, because sometimes these defilements are very profound. But for the most part, we have some idea of what they are. So what do we need to do? And of course, one of the very important things is that we have to be mindful. Yeah? So mindfulness is one of those fundamental qualities of mind that allows us to be able to deal with these things. Now, one of the things that I've been talking about quite a lot recently is the Satipatthana practices. And we've been doing a workshop at our Dhammaloka Center in Perth talking about Satipatthana practices. And there's a lot of misunderstanding about how Satipatthana actually works. Yeah? And one of those important misunderstandings, and this is something that you don't find in the suttas at all, is the idea that if you are mindful, that mindfulness will enable more mindfulness in the future. Mindfulness begets mindfulness. Yeah? So be as mindful as you can throughout the day, when you do all your various things, yeah, when you walk around, when you wash your dishes, when you go to work, when you watch TV, when you do whatever, right? Be mindful, because the idea is if you are mindful in everyday life, in all your activities, you build up mindfulness as if you are building up a muscle in the body. The problem is that mindfulness does not work like a muscle. A muscle does get stronger if you push weights or whatever. Yeah, we all know that. That's obvious. But mindfulness is not something that gets stronger just because you use it. Maybe it's a little bit stronger, yeah, but there is no real evidence, as far as I'm aware, that actually it becomes stronger just by using it. In fact, I would say sometimes it can be the opposite. And if you hear a lot of these ideas about, being mindful, and just by being mindful in everyday life, try your very best to be aware of what is going on. If you hear a lot of teachings like that, what happens is that you start to use willpower. You start to use effort to force your mind onto what you are doing. And the more willpower you use, the more effort you use to try to be mindful, the more tired you will be at the end of the day, at the end of the week, at the end of whatever. Because all this effort, all this trying business actually tires you out. We know that is true, right? If you have to focus on something for a long period of time, stay with something you don't like, you become tired very often. So very often it can be counterproductive, because then when you get tired, well, then mindfulness gets weak, because it means you're not able to sustain that effort, that trying of being mindful. So there can be inherent drawbacks in trying to be mindful all the time. There can be problems with it that actually lead to the opposite of the desired result. Instead of making you more mindful, it can make you less mindful. And if you are mindful of things that are unpleasant, it can make your mind want to turn away from mindfulness. If you force your mind to be on things that are inherently unpleasant, your mind may become averse to mindfulness. It may prefer to fantasize, yeah, or to whatever it is, because being here and now is just dukkha, it's just terrible. Don't want to be here. I want to be somewhere else, in the future, in the past, in the fantasy world, whatever, but not here. This is the worst place, because it's so terrible to be here. So this is the first thing, yeah. But the second thing, which is far more problematic, and I did talk about this also on last Friday night at the Dhammaloka Center, but the other thing which is far more problematic is the fact that the Buddha never said that mindfulness leads to mindfulness. This is not a teaching of the Buddha. What the Buddha said is that once you have mindfulness, you apply it to a meditation subject, yeah, or whatever it is, and then you gain results through meditation practice. And those results are things like peace of the mind and joy and these kind of things. But he doesn't ever say that mindfulness leads to mindfulness. What he does say, and this is the interesting part, yeah, what he says leads to mindfulness. There's two things that lead to mindfulness. And those two things are right view and sila and morality. Those are the two things that lead to mindfulness. So right view is very important, and this is why this sutta is so interesting. And this is why the idea of thinking about the world in the right way is so interesting, because it enables meditation practice. If you understand the world in the right way, your mind will not be interested in that world. It will withdraw from it, and instead will enable you to focus on the breath or whatever it is. So that right view actually enables meditation practice directly, because you know what is worthwhile pursuing and what is not worthwhile pursuing. Right view is incredibly powerful, and this is why it is worthwhile trying to grasp what it actually means. That is why it is worthwhile reading the suttas a little bit. Now we're reading the Attadanda Sutta, which has a fair bit about right view in it, about the danger of the world, because it is inherently violent and all of these kind of things. And the cause of that violence is the very sensuality that we crave for. Crazy, yeah? Basically, by craving for sensuality, we are asking for violence and problem at the same time. This is very profound. And if you understand that, it really makes you withdraw so much interest from that world. So right view is incredibly important, and this is why right view needs to be a practical kind of right view, a right view that engages you emotionally so that you can move in the right direction. You can feel stirred, you can feel a sense of urgency about the path, just like the Buddha-to-be felt a sense of urgency right here in this sutta. So right view, very interesting topic, one of my favorite topics in Buddhism, because of the power to move us forward. It's always the beginning of the Noble Eightfold Path. Everything starts with right view. Every one of you coming here tonight has some degree of right view. Otherwise you wouldn't be here. Otherwise you would be, I don't know what you would be doing, going to the pub maybe, but you wouldn't be here. Otherwise, what's the point of being here if you have right view? But the other aspect is morality, virtue. And this is where mindfulness kind of comes in a little bit, because that morality, one of the most important things to enable morality to happen is to have a certain degree of awareness in ordinary life. I was saying that mindfulness does not lead to mindfulness, but virtue leads to mindfulness. So the way we should apply our awareness in daily life is not just to be aware for awareness' sake. That doesn't get you anywhere. But we should be aware for the sake of purifying ourselves. If you are aware for the sake of purifying yourself, it means that you are developing the virtue. You're developing the morality, you're developing the purity of mind that will lead to mindfulness down the track. This is how mindfulness arises. So this is how you use your preliminary mindfulness via virtue, via watching yourself, being aware of what is going on, and then through that increase in purity or kindness, whatever you want to call it, then you're building up more mindfulness for the future. That is how we should actually have mindfulness in daily life. So be aware of what you do. Remember the importance, the significance of that kindness inside. Virtue is kind of maybe a slightly old-fashioned word, but kindness. Kindness is never out of fashion. Kindness is always something very positive. So remember kindness. Remember that moment after moment after moment. That is the mindfulness that you want, and that is what you want to be aware of in daily life, while you work, while you're with your family, while you're watching TV. I don't know if you watch TV, probably many of you don't watch very much TV, but whatever it is that you're doing, playing your sports or whatever it is, you are aware of your mind state, you're aware of how you speak and how you act, and as you are aware of those things, and you understand how to guide yourself in the right way, that is where purity comes, that is where mindfulness arises, and that is how you purify yourself from all of these negative qualities that the Buddha is talking about in this sutta. So that is the part of the sutta which has to do with has to do with the path, yeah? And I will stop sharing now. I'll come out of the sharing so we can come back again. So that is that sutta which has to do with the Buddhist path, and bringing a little bit in about mindfulness there. We still have to do the last part of the sutta, yeah? So please remind me next time I see you. I'll do the very last part, perhaps, maybe not. Everything is uncertain. We'll see what happens next time. But I will stop there for today and just say very nice to see you all again and wish you all the very best. I'll pass over to you, Chris.